Hi, everybody. This webinar is focused on winning Department Award contracts in 2026. We're going to be speaking about the CMMC preparation for U.S. and international suppliers. I have two guests that are part of the presentation and discussion roundtable today. And should you have any questions, please either raise your hand or drop them in the Q&A. What we'll then do is we'll promote you up to ask your questions live, but that way we can be interactive with the members here. My name's Tom Brennan. I'll be one of the moderators this morning. And of course, I have a little bit of assessment background, so I'll probably add some color to it. But I'd like to introduce first Leslie. I'm going to mess up your last name, Leslie. What's the proper
Okay.
spelling?
Yeah, it's Lessie Skiba. Hi, everyone.
Excellent. Thank
Um,
you.
no problem.
And Derrich Phillips. So let's get started with a quick introduction for both of them, and then we'll move into some of the questions that we have. Leslie, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am the Deputy Managing Director at the Cyber Readiness Institute. We are a nonprofit organization, and we're focused on the human behavior aspects of cybersecurity. How we're related to this particular webinar is we have an online self-paced program that is totally free for anyone to use, as well as we have a coaching program to walk people through this program. But this is an entry point into the CMMC level one. So I'll talk a little bit later in this discussion about some of the engagements we've had with different parts of the US, prepping companies to go through CMMC level one. But happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. Derek.
Awesome. Well, I'm Derrich Phillips. I am the founder of a CMMC Professionals Network, CPN for short. It's a nonprofit organization which focuses on upskilling the CMMC ecosystem. So those consultants and assessors, we provide them with hands-on training to expose them to the rigor that they're going to experience when they're helping those defense contractors prepare for their CMMC certification. And then also, I'm the president of Aspire Cyber, which is focuses on CMMC readiness. And also, we're an approved training provider. So we deliver the CMMC certification training for the CCP and CCA. So excited to be here. Always happy to talk CMMC, one of my favorite topics. It's a great year to kick off, great way to kick off 2026.
Sounds great. Sounds great. So representing nonprofit cyber, my name's Tom Brennan. I'm trying to help the organization, both all of the members that are now reaching over 50 around the world, and lots of their downstream members to learn more about this particular topic. Fundamentally, the Department of Defense certainly is focused on trying to correct organizations that blatantly have lied on their contracts as it pertains to handling data. And we know that the Lincoln Law is a pretty big deal, right? So one issue that pops up a lot is the international organizations, right? U.S. based, there's a good role I think happening with people helping organizations be better, and then internationally there are international suppliers. So this webinar is hoping to begin a dialogue. And help people understand what resources are available to them and where they can, learn more. And then, of course, pointing you back to nonprofitcyber.org for a lot of good guidance and information. And each of the roundtable speakers will certainly provide additional guidance. So let's jump into it. First question I think might be let's go for Derek. Derek, would you mind giving me a little overview for CMMC, particularly around the different levels? That way people can have an understanding what FCI and CUI handling requirements.
Certainly. So CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, it is a pre-award requirement for all defense contractors and also subcontractors. So essentially, any organization that's providing services to the Department of War, and if they're receiving sensitive information in the performance of that contract, so either federal contract information, which is not intended for public release, that can be something as simple as delivery dates or just email communications between that company and the defense contracting officer, that would kind of fall into the category of federal contract information. And then the higher tier of sensitive information would be controlled unclassified information. That could be more so like technical drawings, blueprints, things like that, where you have a higher level of requirements to protect that information. So CMMC has three levels. Level one is 15 requirements. So cybersecurity controls to protect that FCI, that federal contract information. And then once you escalate to level 2, where you're handling controlled unclassified information, now you go from 15 requirements to 110 requirements. So that's a significant jump, significant compliance burden, costs, and just overall safeguarding of that sensitive information. And then at level 3, you are still handling controlled unclassified information, but it's even at a higher sensitivity level where you're potentially handling export control information about weapon systems or things along those lines. And at that point, you need to also be assessed by the Department of War, their assessors, which is under their DIPCAC. They will perform a separate assessment for the additional 24 requirements at level 3. So it's again, at 3 levels. And what's most important, I would say, about CMMC, with it being pre-award, meaning that as of November 10th, that's when CMMC went into effect last year. Now we're going to start to see Department of War solicitations have CMMC requirements in them, and it'll specify what level that you have to meet to basically be awarded that contract. But if those defense contractors do not have not met those requirements, then they're not going to be eligible to win that contract. They can bid on it, but once it comes time for award, if they don't have their, whether it's their CMMC level 1, level 2 self-assessment or in the system, the SPURS system, or if they don't have their certification assessment, if that's what the solicitation requires, then they will not be able to be awarded that contract. And then that means it goes to whoever's next up that's eligible. And CMMC is information centric, which means wherever that information flows, that federal contract information, that controlled unclassified information, FCI, CUI, wherever it flows, the requirements follow. So it doesn't matter how far down that supply chain you are or where you're located. If you're handling that sensitive information in non-federal systems, so on your corporate network or in the cloud, then you have to adhere to those CMMC requirements.
Yeah, well, there's quite a lot to unpack there, right? There's a lot of good
It is.
information, and it's pretty complicated. So Leslie, you mentioned your organization, and please maybe drop a link in chat or tell us some more about the programs that you guys have and resources that might help organizations both here in the U.S. and even internationally start to understand what's important and what's required.
Absolutely. So, Tom, I'm really glad that you bring up the international aspect as well, because the Cyber Readiness Institute, we are a nonprofit where we are US based. We are very globally focused. So we have run programs within the US focusing on critical infrastructure as well as CMMC, well, stepping stone or entry points to CMMC. And then internationally as well, with both international governments as well as international companies. So we work very closely with the Commercial Law Development Program within the U.S. Department of Commerce internationally, as well as some other partners that are on the ground in a number of different regions. So both in Europe, Asia, Central Asia. So, okay. Sorry, I just was seeing the chat. So, as far as international access to the cyber readiness program, anyone is able to access. And again, as I mentioned before, it is totally free for anyone to use. You can just go to the link that I dropped in the chat, the cyberreadinessinstitute.org, and sign up for the cyber readiness program. And the cyber readiness program is focused on 4 core issues: passwords, software updates, phishing, and secure file and storage transfer. In addition to that, also forming a business continuity plan and incident response plan. So these things are often pretty daunting when it comes to small businesses getting started. So we provide a number of templates. We walk through why these are the core 4 issues and how people can actually put these into practice within their organizations without piling on a lot of complicated technology. So we want to focus on the human side and making sure that everything is done in the correct framework, and then you can add additional certifications on top of that, additional technologies, but getting everything organized from the beginning. The Cyber Readiness Institute's Cyber Readiness Program is a really great starting point for that. So again, we are US based, but have a very global focus, and we do have our program translated into a few different languages, but the browser translation within Google Chrome and other browsers works pretty well as well if you happen to be using a language that we don't have it translated into.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of good resources available, and that's the purpose of what the associations and the different nonprofits are focused on. Um, Derrich, where's the gap here between, let's say, level one and let's say the next level? Like where's the stretch? And maybe one thing that would be give some context here is I'll give you an example. If I was, as an example, to be manufacturing cabling, and I'm doing cabling for, let's say, fighter planes or submarines or some things that certainly have some delicacy. That may not necessarily be a level one requirement. That may be a different type of requirement. So you can maybe speak to maybe the different requirements from what you've seen and the different types of organizations so people can get a feel for, are they selling coffee to the government or to the DoD, or are they actually making, items that are going to be used in warfare?
Certainly, and that's a good distinction to kind of draw those lines. And what I didn't mention is I'm also a lead CMMC Certified Assessor. So to date, I've served on 3 certification assessment teams. So actually going through and serving on a certification team for an organization that was trying to get CMMC Level 2 certified. And on the ones I've served on, fortunately, knew what they were doing and they were in good shape. So they did get their certification. So that I bring that insight as well. But I would say on the consulting side, what I see a lot where organizations, they really struggle with understanding what type of information they're handling in the performance of their contract. And it's not only the information they're receiving from the Department of War, but it's also they can be producing sensitive information in the performance of that contract that could be FCI or CUI. So that's one of the most important things when I'm first meeting with a client is really understanding, okay, what does your contract say? What clauses do you have in that contract? And then what type of information are you either receiving or producing? And as far as some examples, we work with a lot of manufacturers and we work with one that does produce cables. And essentially the information around the specifications of how to create that cable, what size the connectors need to be, and different specifications like that, that falls into usually the category of controlled unclassified information. It's not intended for public release. So, at a minimum, it's going to be FCI. But typically, the more technical in nature it is, like drawings and blueprints, that's likely going to be that higher level at CUI. And then also, we have companies where they are doing things like landscaping or cleaning. And in that case, they're likely not handling CUI. There likely is going to be federal contract information, FCI. So it's going to be just communications about what buildings do they need to clean and when and delivery dates. But it could cross over into that area where if they have detailed blueprints or detailed maps of a military base, for example, of all the buildings they're cleaning, what units are in each base, now that's getting more sensitive in nature and potentially could be CUI. And I always encourage our clients to reach out to the contracting officer to get clarification on what is this? Because technically CUI should be marked. A lot of times it's not marked because it's not coming from the government, but it should be marked, or if it's coming from the prime, and a lot of times it's not. So it leaves the defense contractor trying to figure it out, and they really struggle with that. And in reality, the government struggles with it as well. That's why we have this CUI program, because it is challenging to really properly mark this information. But that is a starting point where you first identify, okay, what information are we receiving, what information are we producing, what's our final deliverable to the Department of War, and just kind of do a data flow and understand, like, okay, where is this information going, the people, facilities, technologies, where is it, where does it live, what's the final deliverable. That those are some key factors. And then if they can't get guidance from the contracting officer or their prime, then they kind of have to do their own due diligence. There is a CUI repository that's hosted by NARA, and also the Department of War has their own CUI repository that has examples of different types of FCI and CUI, or specifically CUI. So that is another starting point to get some insights on what potentially type information is in scope.
Makes sense. Makes sense. When we talk about the organization that's providing a product or a service to the Department of War, they need to go through a self-assessment, or it needs to be done by a third party that has been accredited. Can either one of you maybe speak to that a little bit, just to kind of set the tone for organizations that are listening to this, trying to figure out, well, we want to do business with DoD and maybe other agencies in the future. Is there a requirement here that they have to have some third party do this work, or is it something they can do themselves?
So I'll
Sure.
go ahead and take this first and then let you jump in because
Yeah.
I can talk about what we've done in Hawaii with a group there. They were interested in, there was a group of businesses that was interested in getting CMMC 1 certified. And they went through the cyber readiness program, which is a self-paced program. However, with CRI, we do offer coaches as well, and that allows people to have someone to bounce ideas off of and just talk through different scenarios. So, with that, we also have an additional certification, and it's called the CRI Cyber Certification. And that is where, yes, you're going through and creating your playbook and creating your incident response and business continuity plan, but you're then having someone from CRI verify, yes, you do actually have these policies and procedures in place and you have trained your employees. So it is not necessarily a third party verification for CMMC 1, but it is something that you can use to have someone verify, yes, we are on the right track, which then, Derrich, I'll turn it over to you for the specifics around the assessment versus verification and other levels of CMMC.
Thanks, Leslie. And that's a great resource, especially at level one, to have a second set of eyes come in and review those documents, because it shows at least that organizations doing their due diligence and they're not just penciling it. So in terms of the levels, and right now I mentioned CMMC went into effect in November of 2025. There is a 4-phase, 3-year rollout. So for this first year for CMMC, the first 12 months, it is requiring CMMC level 1 and CMMC level 2 self-assessments. So what that means is the organizations who are either already doing business with the Department of War or plan on it, they would need to first do their level 1 self-assessment. And those are 15 requirements. They can go on the Department of War website and find the self-assessment guide, or go directly to the NIST 80171 to find those requirements. But the thing about CMMC level 1, those requirements technically apply to all federal contractors. Those map to the FAR 21 requirements. So essentially, any federal contractor that's handling federal contract information in non-federal systems, then they are essentially already attesting that they meet those level 1 requirements by just signing the contract. And with that self-assessment, it's not necessarily, for those 15 requirements, not necessarily just an automatic slam dunk. Some of those requirements are challenging and technical in nature. For example, around like boundaries or network boundaries. So a lot of those requirements are going to be related to do you have a firewall, and then also your access control and physical security. So it does help if the company does not have that internal expertise to work with, or organizations that can assist them. So beyond that level 1 self-assessment, once the organization completes that, and there is no remediation plan or POAM, plan of action and milestones for level 1, you have to meet all of the requirements in order to go into SPURS, the Supplier Performance and Risk System, which is how the Department of War tracks all of these assessments. You go into there and then you would basically attest that, yes, our company meets all 15 requirements for CMMC level 1. And that has to be done by an affirming official from that company. So not Bob or Sally from IT. It needs to be a senior level official from that company. Typically, if it's a small business, it's going to maybe be the president or CEO or VP, someone who has authority over the budget for CMMC and is basically saying, yeah, we meet these requirements, and that's an attestation they're making in a government system. Level 2, still for phase 1, is self-assessment. However, it's a little more complex because, again, you're going from 15 requirements to 110 requirements. And I've been talking about the requirements, but also for each requirement, there's corresponding assessment objectives. So for level 2, there's 320 assessment objectives. So each requirement has assessment objectives, which how an assessor like myself can determine if a company objectively is meeting their requirements. And typically, if I'm working with a client and they say that we've done a gap assessment already, and I say, oh, that's great. All right, what resource did you use? And typically they'll say, okay, we use 80171. That's where basically the controls come from. 800-171, it has a supplemental guide called 800-171 Alpha, which includes the assessment objectives. So if you don't use that one, you're just seeing the requirements. You're not even seeing the assessment objectives. So at that point, I know they didn't accurately do a self-assessment. And in the context of CMMC, as I mentioned, the Department of War has what they call their CMMC assessment guides, which includes both the requirements and the assessment objectives. So that's typically what I recommend that people use those. And I'll put the link in the chat for all those resources. But for level 2, you have to have a minimum of 88 points, or your SPURS score has to be a minimum of 88 before you can self-attest at level 2. And that 88 is not easy. It is could be a huge hurdle for a lot of organizations just to get that 88. If they can't get to that 88 self-assessment, they're not eligible to be awarded Department of War solicitations. That's phase 1. Then phase 2, which is going to start November 2026, that's going to start the certification assessments. At that point, organizations, if that solicitation says that that organization or that solicitation requires a CMMC level 2 certification assessment, that means before a company can be awarded the contract, they've been already assessed by a third party, a CMMC third party assessment organization known as C3POs. And it is that's what it is. It's an external assessment coming in and objectively determining, are you meeting all 110 requirements, 320 assessment objectives? I'll take a breath now and let you follow any other questions.
So a lot of organizations, I think, have used other frameworks. They've used the NIST CSF. They've used the Center for Internet Security version 8 controls, or version 8.1 perhaps now. Other control frameworks that are out there that people use for best practices. If they've diligently met those requirements, and I'll use the CIS version 8 as an example. Let's say they did an IG3 or an IG2. Would that put them on a pathway that the organization's in a healthy environment, or is CMMC completely different and it has a whole new set of rules? What's your opinion on that one?
Yeah, I would say it puts them on a good pathway. At least they're already getting an understanding of adhering to frameworks. However, I would say with CMMC, it is a different ball game. There are a lot of nuances with CMMC that you don't see in other frameworks like ISO 27001 or SOC 2. For example, with CMMC, it requires that in-scope information, so let's say CUI, for example, if you're storing it in a cloud environment, that cloud environment has to be FedRAMP moderate. And you don't see that in other frameworks. So that's one of the nuances. Then also there are other nuances around if you're handling export controlled information, where then at that point, whoever has access to that information, you have residency requirements. And for example, like only US persons who are authorized can access information. So there's a lot of different nuances that CMMC kind of adds another layer of complexity. But at the same time, there's also a lot of overlap between other frameworks.
Yeah, and certainly one of them, CIS as an example, would be voluntary. And this is not voluntary. This will be compliance required in order to participate, as you mentioned earlier. Excellent. So, Leslie, in addition to the materials that you guys have created to help organizations, dip their toe in the water and see what it's like, are there any other continuous compliance or anything beyond certification that your organization may focus on or provide organizations with?
Absolutely. So we also have our Cyber Leader program, which is again a self-paced online program. However, it is focused more on change management. So yes, it covers a lot of what the cyber readiness program touches on, and it goes a little bit more in depth with some of the technical terms. So if you are someone that is going through the cyber readiness program and you're interested in taking a next step, or maybe you're having trouble convincing your leadership that yes, this is something that we should be focusing on, that cyber leader program is a great next step to go through. In addition to our online self-paced programs, if you are a cybersecurity professional or are passionate about cybersecurity and helping small businesses, we also have a coach training program. Then you can use that as a resume builder, or potentially just dip your toes into cybersecurity a bit more and start working with small and medium-sized businesses to help them understand the importance of cybersecurity from a human behavior perspective. We have that, and It's about 3 different days of training, and then we have you work with one of the CRI coaches along with some companies. So you uh, essentially get to shadow a CRI coach going through the program with the company. So that's a really great program. And we have been working, we're wrapping up actually a pilot with water utilities within the US, and we used a number of coaches for that program as well. But that will be transitioning from a pilot into a full-on program at the end of this quarter. So.
Is that international or just US based?
The water utilities program is just US based. However, the coach program is international. And we do have 3 different coaches that are working internationally as of right now. And we have one more that's in training.
That's awesome. Cool.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned earlier, Leslie, a little information around the Hawaii organizations that you were helping out, and those would kind of fall into almost the lessons learned, case study type stuff. Is there anything in particular that you maybe want to call out with that experience? Maybe the lessons learned, and then I'm sure Derrich has some more stories to tell us about, literally.
Absolutely. So I would say that Derrich actually touched on what I was going to mention is that the CRI program is a really great entry point for these companies, but CMMC is a slightly different animal. So whereas CRI, the program is going to get you organized, you're going to have to go those next steps and work with or either trust yourself doing the self-assessment or work with someone that knows more about CMMC to make sure that you're aligned with those frameworks. But CRI's program in general is really a great entry point to some of those more sophisticated certifications and frameworks. So I would say that in general, the lessons learned from that pilot was, yes, CRI was great, and it helped organizations get that first step because it is quite intimidating to take a look at CMMC1 or any of these other certifications or frameworks and try to decide where to even start. CRI's templates really are a great foundation and framework to get started with.
Excellent. So again, Derrich, the context would be, I'm listening to this. I have a product or a service to sell to the Department of War, and I'm just getting notified now that the contract I'm trying to bid on has these requirements. Any war stories or any helpful tips that you've seen with organizations that are in that predicament, as they move into 2026?
Certainly, one of the war stories from the front lines that come to mind is we partner with a lot of Apex accelerators. So those organizations are funded by the Department of War, so they're a good free resource. And they had sent us a lady who she's the president of a company, small business that did a wide variety of things, but they were going to be doing like going to the military bases and kind of doing assessments of the military bases. And essentially, her company had won the contract, but the contracting officer contacted her and said, "Hey, we don't see your NIST 800-171 self-assessment in SPURS. Is that an error or what's the issue?" And the lady, she didn't even know what they were talking about. Like, okay, well, I don't know, we don't have that. Like, what? But long story short, it ended up becoming that was the requirement for the contract, and that so essentially CMMC maps to 800-171. And at that point in time, that contract said, okay, you have to have your 800-171 self-assessment in SPURS. And they didn't have it, and they were not eligible for that contract. And she told me that contract was worth $5 million. So if you can manage for a business of any size, that's a lot of money, but especially for a small business. And that's just a good example of, this compliance. Department of War, they're serious about it. And again, this was last year. So now with CMMC in full effect, there are going to be a lot more organizations that's going to encounter situations like that where they're just not going to be eligible to be awarded the contract. And then in regards to resources, so for CMMC Professionals Network, CPN, in addition to really focusing on upskilling those consultants and assessors who are going to be providing support for the defense contractors, we offer different like webinars and free training. We have a lot of different policy templates and system security plan templates that's just available for anyone to download and use. And this year, we're going to be launching a system security plan workshop where it's just going to be open to anyone who wants to attend. And we're going to basically kind of walk them through the steps of creating a system security plan, which really is like your compliance Bible for each company, where it's outlining how is that company meeting those CMMC requirements and assessment objectives. So it's a very important document, and that's something that the CPN is going to be offering for anyone who needs that level of support. And then lastly, we're going to be launching our CMMC Academy, which is going to be tailored towards small businesses who are maybe they just don't have the budget to hire a consultant to help them with CMMC, but we're basically going to be empowering them to do it themselves, at least at level 1 self-assessment. So we're kind of going to be walking them through step by step. How do you do asset inventory? How do you do a data flow diagram, system security plan? So those are some of the premier services that are going to be free that CPN will be launching this year.
It sounds like Leslie's training program and your activities go hand in hand, which is super nice.
Absolutely.
In chat, I dropped the official CMMC AD resource. That website's been very helpful because that is the organizational body. There's a lot of good resources there as well. I also want to call out the CMMC marketplace and the different accreditation levels. There is a lot behind this. I know I've been involved with CMMC in some way, shape, or form in the last 4 years, and it's good to, in my opinion, to see it out there in the public space. And now, as we are talking about this, another item I think that's come up is maturity models. People are typically used to doing an assessment, and they say, hey, do you have a policy? Do you have a procedure? Do you have people? Do you have this? Do you have that? And this is basically a scale, right? From, let's say, 1 to 10, where are you on that maturity scale? CMMC has some interesting components, and maybe for validation, Leslie and Derrich, it's not about maturity in some cases, is it?
Correct. Yeah. Initially, I guess the goal it was for the Department of War was going to be kind of tying in maturity to see over a time period they're going to be improving, but they kind of scrapped that with CMMC 1.0, and it's no longer about maturity per se. However, what we haven't really talked about yet as much is CMMC is very documentation heavy. So once you get to CMMC level 2, the system security plan, those policies, that's not optional for CMMC level 2, especially for a certification. So putting my lead assessor hat on when I come in to do assessment of an organization, and they say, all right, and we're going to, let's say, for example, access control, and okay, whenever you onboard someone new into your Microsoft tenant, for example, what's that process and what's the approval process? And they may explain it to me, whoever that may be, IT or HR. Like, all right, let me see what there's documented at. You can't just tell me. I need evidence. It's not optional. So that's what really stumps a lot of organizations, because they may be doing it, but you have to show me. I need artifacts. I can't just take your word for it. That's a big challenge with CMMC.
And a lot of times in the assessment world, a historical 6-month look back is usually appropriate. Does the CMMC require these organizations that want to do business with the Department of War to have a look back period? So, like, for example, if they're not doing it today, they may not even meet the 6-month or 12-month requirement to do the look back. Is that something you stumbled on?
Not necessarily a look back, but there is let's say, for example, if in the policy they say they review their system security plan once a year and make updates, or they review whatever the policy or procedure is, it can't be longer than 1 year. That's kind of where the Department of War draws a line, where you can't go 2 years without reviewing a policy or some other time-based requirement. So, but not necessarily historically look back. No.
So let's try to help some people that are listening in that are, they're in business, they're trying to provide for their family of their employees as well as their own, and they want to, sell a widget, whatever that might be. It might be a bullet, could be a piece of wiring, could be whatever it is that's part of the manufacturing ecosystem. Do the organizations have you found that there's ability for them to simply outsource all of this and say, you know what, I'm not going to do any of it. I'm going to outsource all to a third party, and I'm just going to use their systems, and then I'm going to continue to build my widgets, and then have a third party that's going to be there. Have you seen a complete outsourcing in the community or in the business space here? I think that some people had said this is a lot of compliance tax. I'm just going to go ahead and defer that liability.
Fortunately, I have seen it, and I don't know if you want me to mention vendors or not, but I am familiar with several vendors who offer basically a fully managed CUI enclave or CMMC solution, which is a category we'll fall into, where it's fully managed. However, there are like going to be a handful of requirements that the defense contractor still has to handle, which is going to be more on the administrative side. And there are some affordable options as well. The caveat with that is that's not going to be a good fit for every organization. It's likely going to be a good fit for small organizations that don't really have complex operations, and all of their CUI, so that in scope sensitive information, can be stored in a cloud environment, can be digital, they don't have to print it. Then that can be a good use case for those type of solutions. But if you have to print that CUI, you have to print those blueprints, drawings, whatever it may be, that adds another layer of complexity. Now you have to track both the digital and physical information, and that whatever format it's in. So that likely wouldn't be a good solution for them. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and that's great. So again, for the business owners, there are solutions out there depending on your type of business. You gotta, speak to the right people and do a little homework here. Start off with CRI, see what available information is there. Speak to others that are in the space that are accredited and can do the work. And then if you're not a business owner, but you're a practitioner, you're a technical person, a person that wants to do assessments, and you've been a cyber person for a long, long time, do you think there's enough people that are actually doing this sort of job that are currently enrolled with with Cyber AB and that are there? Or do you think there's still opportunity for people around the world to be part of this program?
Leslie, you want to chime in on that one? I definitely have thoughts, but give you opportunity if you have any thoughts on it.
There's always a need for more people to get familiar with these types of frameworks. There are a lot of us out there. However, anyone that's interested in learning more, I know Derrick's organization probably is often looking for people. CRI, again, I mentioned our coach program. So if you're interested or you have some sort of experience, or again, you're looking to dip your toes into the experience side, CRI does have our fundamentals coaching program. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out to either me directly or through our info@cyberreadinessinstitute.org email address. And we would be happy to talk to you. And we're always looking for more volunteers because there's, again, a lot of people need help. And from CRI's perspective, it's more getting that fundamentals aspect out of the way and having people that are from the small business side of things and have gone through it. It's also really helpful for them to be able to talk to other organizations going through the same thing. One other organization within CRI that I'd like to mention is our Small Business Advisory Council. So if you're a small business, whether you're in cyber or not, we actually almost prefer that you're not. But if you're interested in sharing some of your experiences about your cybersecurity journey, we do meet 3 times a year, and our registration for that is currently open. Our first meeting will be in April of 2026. So if you're interested in that, feel free to reach out for more information.
Awesome. And then my thoughts from more so the certification side, for the people who are looking to make CMMC a profession. As I mentioned, Aspire Cyber, we're an approved training provider. So in order to get certified for CMMC as a CMMC Certified Professional or CMMC Certified Assessor, you do have to take the licensed training through an approved training provider. And in my humble or maybe biased opinion, CMMC is the hottest cybersecurity certification right now, because there are estimated over 200,000 companies that will be impacted by CMMC. And right now there's less than maybe 2,000 people who are certified to do it in terms of being a professional, CMMC certified professional or an assessor. I know there's less than 2,000 assessors. So if you imagine, just the numbers do not add up. If you have hundreds of thousands of companies that are ultimately going to maybe a minimum need a CMMC level 2 certification, and you have 2,000 assessors, and I think there's less than 100 CMMC third-party assessment organizations. There's going to be a huge demand for people that have that skill set. And I would say the thing about CMMC, it's very specialized. So you have a lot of people that have IT and cybersecurity experience, maybe been doing it 20, 30 years. However, they have not been doing CMMC that long. CMMC is new. So essentially, it's basically leveling the playing field for anyone looking to get into cybersecurity. And it potentially can be viewed as almost an entry-level cybersecurity role. And we know cybersecurity is typically not viewed as an entry-level role, but CMMC is really presenting that opportunity for people who just graduate from college, or maybe transitioning career fields. They can take that CMMC certified professional training and get caught up to speed with CMMC, and now they have just as much experience and expertise as the vast majority of other people because it's new. So I think it's such a unique opportunity, and I've been singing it from the mountaintops. Like, hey, if you're interested in cybersecurity, or you are looking to transition, or you're recently laid off as a federal employee, or whatever the case may be, CMMC is a very hot career field. And on top of that, you have with CMMC, you know exactly who you're going to serve once you get certified. You have hundreds of thousands of defense contractors that are going to need your help. Versus if you get another generic certification, let's say CISP or CISM or any of those, it's like, okay, I have that certification. Now what do I do with it? Who do I serve? So you're kind of lost from there. But with CMMC, and now it also, last month, ISACA, who is the organization that does the CISM and the CRIS and all those certifications, they've taken over the CAICO, which handles all of the CMMC certification. And that's a big deal, a really big deal, because ISACA has over 180,000 members. Well, I'm sure the vast majority of those members had never even heard of CMMC until last month when ISACA made that big announcement. So it's from the professional side, huge opportunity with CMMC.
That's awesome. Right. So as we begin to wrap up here, any of the attendees have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A, and I'll simply promote you guys up to be able to ask your question live. I think I have one question coming in here from Mr. Palmer. Jason, let me go ahead and enable you here so you can ask your question live. There we go. Jason, you're able to hear us.
Derrich, I just thought maybe you might want to clarify regarding CMMC when you're stating about an entry-level possibility. I would say that the entry level might be limited to being a registered practitioner or CCP. Certainly the CCA and lead CCA designations require an underlying DoD Workforce 8140.3 certification, which would be either an intermediate or an advanced certification. In the case of an advanced certification, like for being a lead assessor, you need something like a CISSP that requires 5 years in the domains. Not to mention, to be a lead assessor, you require 5 years of managerial in addition to 3 years of underlying audit and assessment. So I'm certainly suggesting, or not disagreeing completely, that CMMC is not a great way to enter. But if you're an entry level, you're probably more on the practitioner side of readiness than you are on the assessment side per se. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, really good point, Jason. And I totally agree with the caveat of CCP. So that CMMC certified professional, there are recommended experience requirements. I think it's 2 years IT or cybersecurity experience or a college degree. And then there is no certification requirement for CCP. So that's really the one I'm referring to with getting started with CCP. Typically, I don't recommend the RP path, just because right now in the state that the RP designation is in, they don't, it's like a self-paced course. I think it's 4 hours the last time I checked. So if someone's interested in really pursuing that certification path, I do encourage them to start with CCP, even coming straight out of high school, college, whatever the case may be, or transitioning from career fields, just because there's no hard barriers to taking that CCP training and getting certified. They obviously still have to develop the skills and get training beyond like hands-on, but there's no barrier saying that they have to have certain criteria met beyond those recommended requirements. But CCA, yeah, everything you just listed, you have to have all of that.
Yeah, thank you for that. So again, there's always complexity to everything. A question coming in here that's typed out is, do you feel that there are qualified MSPs and MSSPs that can take on these burdens so that I can do business. So it sounds like, again, it's more of a, can I push this liability to third party, and can I just continue on with what I'm doing with no involvement and without any perhaps executive sign off? I don't know who wants to take
I love that question. A lot of organizations are going to fall in that category, especially small businesses. They don't have the budget, the internal staff expertise to really devote to trying to comply with CMMC, and outsourcing could be an option for them. One solution that comes to mind that where they can fully outsource it if it's just digital, but they're still going to have executive buy-in or attestation in terms of saying, okay, anyone we tell you to give access to this solution, we're already doing the background check and we're making sure they're authorized. And then the other thing that can't be outsourced is it's a requirement around public sharing, like ensuring that on your social media channels, for example, or website, you're not sharing FCI or CUI. So that's an administrative requirement where you have like some type of review process before you're publishing anything from a marketing standpoint or something like that to make sure it's not FCI or CUI. So beyond that, the technical stuff and everything else can be outsourced. I've seen it, and we've had 2 clients to date who have got level 2 certified, and they've used a 100% solution like that. So I know it can be done.
That's awesome. All right, well, we're running short on time here, so maybe any closing words, Leslie, and then we'll go to Derrich, and then we'll try to wrap up.
Absolutely. So thank you everyone for your time today. Just a reminder, all of the Cyber Readiness Institute resources are totally free, and they're a great entry point to these other frameworks and certifications. So feel free to check us out at cyberreadinessinstitute.org. And if you're interested in helping us grow our coach organization, or you're a small business that's interested in sharing your experience, check out our website, cyberreadinessinstitute.org, or email me directly.
That's awesome.
So much.
Derrich, any final words?
Sure. Thanks again. Hosting us, Tom, awesome moderator. As far as the CMMC Professionals Network, you can check us out at cmmcpathways.org. And we're really just on a mission, again, just upskilling those CMMC professionals and consultants so they can be prepared to really help these organizations who are going to need the support to get CMMC certified. And we focus on just that hands-on training. So whether you are looking to be a consultant, assessor, or if you're just a defense contractor who can't afford to outsource it, and you're going to have to figure it out yourself, we'll be just a good resource for you to help you get those skills. And we've partnered with several cloud service providers like Google Workspace and Microsoft and Prevail too, and they also provide us different like tenants and licenses to help our members get hands-on training. So really excited to be delivering that to the ecosystem.
That's awesome. So definitely a lot to digest. I hope people enjoyed some of the commentary. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out. On behalf of the Nonprofit Cyber Organization, or nonprofitcyber.org, I think everyone's noticed that we're ORG, all of us here, not COM. So these are all nonprofits sort of working together to try to make the world a little bit of a better place. And in this case, this is an effort that's there, that everyone's paying attention to. So again, I'm Tom Brennan with Nonprofit Cyber, helping out, and I appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today. Thank you.